Over the next few minutes, I'm going to tell you what age you can start having conversations with your kids about masturbation and what are some of the most important points to include. And welcome back to Sitting in a Car. I'm Sarah Sproul and I am creator of Sit in a Car, and I sit in a car with you each week, answering a question to help you raise your confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. And this week we are talking about masturbation and what age should your kid be before you can start having a conversation about this very topic. I want to tell you a story about one conversation I had with my kids about masturbation. It wasn't the first conversation, but it certainly has stuck in my memory. I think they were like 12, 10 and 8, and we were home in Melbourne because, as you may know, I live in Ireland, in Dublin, but I'm from Melbourne originally. So we go home every so often for Christmas. And we were in Melbourne, in the car, driving along, listening to talk radio, time around breakfast time, and the presenters were talking about different ways to fall asleep. When you're feeling like you can't fall asleep, if you've got insomnia, what are some of the things you can do to fall asleep? And they were listing hot milk, and doing some exercise, listening to something boring on a podcast, and then in a very euphemistic sort of way, i.e. sort of just hinting at it, they did mention the idea of masturbation, but of course they didn't say that word. But my kids are listening to this because, we talk about if we can't get to sleep, what do we do? And my kids were listening, and they were listening, and you could see them really listening. And I sort of said, "Oh, I think I know what they're talking about." And one of them said, "Yeah, I think they're talking about masturbation." And I went, "Yeah, I think they are too, but they can't say the word, right?" And then we had a conversation about the fact that in some parts of the world, and sometimes of parts of the media, and sometimes of day, that a conversation about touching ourselves on that part of our body isn't really socially acceptable. So let's find out for your family, what is the ideal age to start having a conversation about masturbation? And in the question, this question came in to me on Instagram, the parent asked that they wanted to be able to tell their kids that it's perfectly normal for them to touch themselves. So let's get going. So point 1, most parents will think that a conversation around masturbation should happen sometime just before puberty, because a lot of adults have this idea in their head that masturbation is something that happens around puberty, and it's a sign of puberty, and teenagers are all into masturbation. But the reality is something quite different, that we can be talking to kids around the age of 4 and younger about the fact that touching their body is something that is really normal, particularly around those parts around their genitals. So point 1 is that we can be having these conversations with children 4 and even younger. Before we move on to point 2, I just want to add for point 1 that sometimes the assumptions that adults make are about that really you only have to talk to boys about masturbation, but that's not true either. Inside the monthly membership that I run for parents who want ongoing support and a supportive community to help them have these conversations with their kids in a more normal and natural way, we talked about this month the idea of masturbation, and we got a guest in who talked about her experience of growing up in a family who didn't understand how to talk about masturbation, who thought it was bad and wrong, and maybe a little bit dirty. And she was a person that had a body that enjoyed having the genitals touched. And so she's in her 30s now, and she very generously shared her story with us to help us understand why ongoing conversations about masturbation is important for very young children, and what are the things that parents can do to make sure their child doesn't feel bad and wrong and icky and sort of damaged. And one of the points that she made was that to have an awareness as an adult about the fact that masturbation is absolutely normal, and it's one of those things that some kids do when they're young and some kids don't do when they're young. It's perfectly fine. So we're not constantly asking our child, "Why are you doing that? Get your hand out of your pants," whatever that is. And she would be a living testament to the fact that, we can get over difficult experiences like she had growing up in her family, and just for the record, loving, wonderful, gorgeous family and they get together all the time and have super wonderful, exciting family get-togethers. But this one thing she remembers as being really difficult and really shameful and really complicated part of her growing up. Point 2. Inside the program that I run for parents, it's called the Evolve School, we have 9 different topic pyramids, I call them, but they're wonderful collections of information that is going to help us have everyday conversations with our kids about sensitive stuff related to sex. And there are 5 of those pyramids, five of those pyramids that talk a little bit about masturbation or touching our own body. So one of the examples of information that we could have a conversation with our child about is that there is behaviors that are good to do in public, and there are behaviors that are more important to do in private. So in public, we could eat food, we could scratch our face, we could maybe even have a dance. But the things we might do in private would be things like go to the toilet. Maybe in your family, you brush your teeth in private. Maybe another thing you do in your family is to touch any other parts of your genitals in private. So that would look like doing them in the bathroom or in the bedroom. And so a conversation we have about our kids is not just that touching our genitals is natural and normal and that it feels good, but also that there are some rules around it. Just like there are rules around how we eat food at the table, or what sort of clothes we wear if we go to McDonald's for a takeaway versus what sort of clothes we wear if we go to the public swimming pool to have a swim. So the takeaway message there is that we teach our kids rules about the culture we live in, the society we live in, our family rules about so many different things, and rules around masturbation are no different. There's no shame or fear around teaching our kids that where is a good place to touch their private parts or their genitals inside the house. Point number 3, just like you may teach your kid rules about traveling in the car. So for example, that when we're in the car, we put on our seatbelt and we don't throw balls around the place because that could distract the driver. We can also teach them hygiene rules around touching their private parts or their genitals. So we could be talking about the fact that it feels really good to do it. Some people do it because it calms them down, or it helps them feel relaxed, or it helps them go to sleep. But one of the most important things to do is to always wash our hands. So you're having a really practical conversation about hand washing, which is sort of a topical conversation, isn't it, at the moment because of COVID-19 and pandemic. At the time of recording, we're still in that sort of environment. So you could even, if you're talking to your 4-year-old or your 3-year-old about hand washing, you could start listing off all the different times and places that we need to wash our hands. We wash our hands after we go to the shops. We wash our hands after we've gone to the playground. We wash our hands before we eat food. We wash our hands after we go to the toilet. And we wash our hands anytime we touch our genitals. So before we finish up, let's recap those 3 points about making conversations about masturbation easier for you to have with your kids. First point was about the age and which genders, all of them, you can have a conversation about masturbation with. Point 2 was about public and private environments and public and private behaviors and how we can relate that to masturbation. And the third point was a hygiene point where we can talk about masturbation related to hand washing. And because we are in a global pandemic, hand washing is a really topical conversation and super easy to talk about, right? Your kid will be really familiar with that conversation, no doubt. So that's sitting in a car for another week where I've answered a question to help you raise your confident and caring young person who respects themselves and the people around them. And if you would like to get more information, more of the background, get to the point where you are so confident with any conversation that you need to have with your child about the body, about sex, about relationships, about consent, head on over to sarahsproul.com/evolve, because we have got the Evolve School coming up soon. It's opening its doors sometime in February. And if you would like to know when the Evolve School opens and you would like to get involved in learning all the background information so you are able to answer questions like this about talking about masturbation with your kids, you can answer them without having to ask me a question. head on over to that link. It's somewhere around this video or in the show notes of the podcast, and I will let you know when the school opens up next. Take care. Bye for now. Masturbation. I don't know why that is, but I always have trouble spelling that word. You could sign up. Nope, start again.